First slide up. I'm going to just tell you a story, first of all, about a man called Alan Sparks. Not a name that will be, I think, known to probably any of us, but just this week, sometimes when I have a slightly early lunch, I turn on ABC radio and I listen to a little bit of a program called the Conversation Hour. Anyone familiar with the Conversation Hour? And I just heard a tail end of an interview with a man called Alan Sparks, and it was an interview that was done in 2013. But this man's story, even the bit that I heard, was just so amazing. And I want to read a section of a book that he wrote, and I'm just coming in on it, and it'll give you background, and I'll just put up a few photos that actually fit in with it. It had been raining for days. 195 millimetres had fallen on Coffs Harbour over 30 hours. The local creeks were raging torrents. I was with my partner, Detective Senior Constable Gavin Dengate, a tremendous workmate at the police station, May 3rd, 1996, when the clear, concise tone heralding a serious announcement came on the police radio network. Any car in the vicinity of Marcia Street, child is believed to have been swept down a stormwater drain. Normally you would expect to see one or more general duty police cars at the scene. But as we pulled up and turned off the siren, only people there were two young boys, Dwayne Teese, Gareth Owens, and some local men who had been working nearby. These were the guys who had raised the alarm. They told us that Dwayne and Gareth had been playing on their boogie boards in the flooded creek with an 11-year-old boy, Jai Waddell. Dwayne and Gareth had their backs turned. When they looked again, Jai had disappeared. We looked into the flooded creek and saw a whirlpool where the creek ended as water was sucked into a stormwater pipe. The thought of a young child being sucked into the whirlpool churned my guts. We jumped into the drain pit and looked along the pipe. It was about the diameter of a hula hoop, about half full of surging flood water. Far off into the distance we saw something trapped inside the drain. It looked as if it might be Jai, but there was no sounds of life coming from it, as the roar of the rushing water. We feared he was either unconscious or dead. One of the workmen turned up and with a bit of rope tied it around my waist, and I turned to Gav and said, if I get into trouble, I'll tug on the rope 3 times, really hard. If you feel that, pull me up and out, okay. I'm not a small person, about 186 centimetres tall. That's about my height. And I weigh about 110 kilo. That's a bit heavier than I weigh. More than 30 kilo more than I weigh. 30 kilo more than what I weigh. Back then, 110 kilo. In the drain, it was like being sent down a water slide tunnel, so fast and out of control. About 80 metres along, I reached a point where the torch was able to illuminate the blockage, and we thought was Jai. Then I realised it wasn't him. It was just a branch and some debris. I tugged on the rope to come up, but as the SES crew, who were now on the scene, started to pull, dreadful realisation dawned. I was damming myself in. I caused the water to bank up and was being engulfed by it. The more they pulled me against it, the bigger the blockage I was creating. I was sure I was going to drown. Gavin, being in the drain himself, would probably feel the rope being pulled on and possibly see what was happening. He crawled back out of the pipe and told the SES workers and police to pull for all they were. The water was, I won't use his word, freezing, and my body temperature must have started to drop. I started to shake uncontrollably from the cold and the fear, or both. I was surrounded by slime-covered concrete walls that were closing in on me. I was sure I'd had it this time. It seemed to take forever as I was dragged all the way back up the pipe. The blokes up top kept pulling, and eventually I could see light again. Coming out of that pipe created a mixture of relief and sadness. We had failed to save the boy. We were about to start searching for other inspection pits to re-enter the pipe when a call came over the police radio. A child could be heard screaming under the road near the Pacific Highway, 600 metres away. Could he really have been swept so far and still be alive? Gavin and I jumped in our car, and with the rest of the crew, we raced down to the scene. I looked around for the source of the screams and saw a hole in the road where a manhole cover had been removed. Someone was lying down on the road, yelling into the manhole. A giant screams came straight back at him. Filthy storm water bubbled up the hole. And through this water came those screams, high-pitched, terrifying screams. I can still hear them today. Help me, help me, help me, please, please help me. Scream went on relentlessly. The screams were the most dreadful thing I've ever heard in my life. It was a primal message on the back of my brain. From that point onwards, my memory is tunneled. I don't have any recollection of what was going on around us. A ladder was produced from somewhere, and I took my suit pants off and stood there in my boxer shorts. Someone from the SES tied another rope around me while Gavin climbed down the ladder. He disappeared under the water. He was doing everything in his power to find this kid. This time it was my turn to follow him into the unknown. At a junction of about 6 stormwater pipes, I thought I could hear Jai's screams just a little bit clearer. Gav, Gav, I shouted, calling him back from a pipe he'd gone up. I think he's up this one. The pipe was narrower than the first. I was forcing my way up against the flow this time, but the water against me was not as fierce. The difficulty, however, was trying to get a grip to propel myself forward. You understand, the water's coming against him this time. The sides of the pipe were thick and slimy with a horrid goo that I had to dig out with my fingernails and toenails. So he's trying to dig his way up against the raging torrent. Physically it was draining. Psychologically it was a nightmare. Jai's screams were getting a little louder the further I went. It was like he was screaming down a giant megaphone directly into my brain. Please, please, please stop screaming, I was saying to myself. Suddenly in my torchlight I saw something, a little face. Only the face, so white, it was the face like a tiny little ghost. I was yelling at him, hang on mate, hang on, I'm coming, I'm coming. Jai was hanging onto a piece of timber that had appeared to have gotten wedged across the pipe. Jai, I screamed, come to the light, let go of the timber and come to the light. So obviously the policeman is down further where the waters are coming down. I was exhausted as my fear and my fear that he'd be washed away was getting stronger. I hardly had anything left in me. Finally, Jai let go of the timber. I saw him coming toward me. Oh my God, I've got him. I screamed down the pipe. Jai washed into me. I folded him into my arms. You just say, thank God, I said to him. Thank God, he said, in a little frail voice, shaking uncontrollably. He started to sob and my emotions overtook me. I held on to him, crying with him. I can't put in words exactly what the feeling was like. All I can... Anyway, he goes on, and if I tell him more, I'll start doing what he was doing and talk about it. Amazing. Some of you may remember this situation. I do. Even though it was back in the 1960s, I remember hearing about it. For his action, this policeman, Alan Sparks, was awarded the Cross of Valour, which is Australia's highest bravery award. We have nothing higher. Then, a number of years later, in August 2016, this same man, Alan Sparks, was awarded Australia's 4th highest bravery decoration, the Commendation for Brave Conduct, saving the life of an Aboriginal man who'd fallen onto the path of an oncoming train at Redfern Station in April 2014. And you can still see footage of that, where you can actually see the train coming. And Alan Sparks is down on the line with this man, desperately trying to free the man whose leg is just pinioned in. And you can see the train coming, and honestly, with about 40 seconds to spare, he's able to finally free the leg and just push him up onto the station, finally get himself up. He went on to write a book, an amazing book called The Cost of Bravery, to explain what happened in these incidents and how his life has been permanently changed by him. And I've already said how I just caught part of the interview. And it is an amazing interview. I understand Ray Martin recently did a series of shows, and one of them was about this man. I didn't actually see that, but I see that Ray Martin's done a part of the foreword for this book. But what I want to pick up on, there are just two things from the radio interview, because there's nothing that Alan Sparks said that made me think he was a Christian. Nothing that he said made me think this man has been born again. But yet in the conversation hour, in this radio program, he made two statements that I thought really struck with me. The first statement was this, and now I've changed part of the wording, but this is almost word for word what he said. Laying our lives down for others is a central part of what it means to be a human being. Now what an amazing thing for a man who I don't think, from what I understand, from what I've read, is actually a Christian. Laying down our lives, the first thing he said, for others is a central part of what it means to be a human being. I think that's an amazing statement. Second statement that he made that stayed with me, he said, laying our lives down for others is costly. Laying our lives down for others is costly. And if you read anything of his story, you'll read about how having gone through all that he went through, he then endured post-traumatic stress disorder, and the depths that the man went to were just absolutely staggering, and how there were just, I'd say, divine interventions to actually stop the man taking his own life. How God just watched over this man, this extraordinary situation. Now I want to take that and I want to give it a different kind of background now. And I'm going to be reading from John chapter 13. If you know John's Gospel, you know that John 13 is just the leading into the final supper that Jesus will be sharing with his disciples. So reading John 13, reading from verse 1. It said it was just before the Passover feast. And Jesus knew the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. So it's Jesus' last night on earth. The disciples still haven't grasped fully what that means, that this will be the last night that they will know him in this earthly sense that he will be sharing with them. That they know there's something happening the next day. But they still have this thought that because he is the Messiah, he's going to be revealed in glory in this amazing way. They have not grasped that before he can be revealed, he must die. And that's the part they haven't fully gotten hold of yet. The second part of verse 1 said, having loved his own who were in the world. Now the NIV said, he now showed them the full extent of his love. He now showed them the full extent of his love. What John literally wrote was, he loved them to the end. He loved them to the end, and that can be understood in a whole lot of different ways. One way is that he loved them to the end of his earthly life, and that's one possible explanation. And the other way, and the way the NIV has taken it, it's saying this: he loved them with all the love that he had in his heart for them. He loved them so that, in a sense, he was pouring out his love so that his love for them was going to be almost exhausted. He was going to love them with all the love that was within him. So the NIV translates it, he showed them the full extent of his love. So what's about to take place is going to be the eternal Son of God showing what the love of God looks like in a most extraordinary way. It rolls off our lips so easily that Jesus' love for us was shown by his dying for us. And I know that's true. I know there are so many scriptures down that way. But I can't ignore the fact that Jesus is trying to show his disciples what love really looks like. When I was a university student and I was baptized in the Holy Spirit through that time, I think we probably all got a bit super spiritual. But when in that group of Christians, you'd ask someone how they were going, and if they didn't answer in a really joyful kind of jubilant, almost bursting out in tongues kind of way, you'd say, "How are you really going?" And you'd have your little frown on, like, I'm really delving into the depths. And I mean, it was the kind of thing that if you weren't having a real good day, you just didn't turn up that day. Because you didn't really want someone delving into the depths. But we would do this, and as I said, we're a little bit super spiritual, I think. But but there's also something in our heart that really wanted to know how the other person was really going. And as I'm looking at this passage, I am seeing that Jesus is showing what his love for his disciples really looks like. And I know his love for the world will be shown the next day when he goes to the cross. But he's showing his disciples something of what his love for them really looks like. And it is amazing. So we know there are two great commandments. First one,
Love God.
Love God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. Second one, love your neighbour as you yourself. We also know that in no small measure our rewards in heaven will be determined by the extent to which we have fulfilled these two great commands. So all the other stuff we may have done, all the other stuff, all the things that we've done that may have earned fruit in that, or gained fruit in some way, we know that at the base of all that, Jesus, in that sense, he will be looking for the fulfillment of the two great commandments. And to the extent we fulfill, that's in my heart, to the extent we fulfill those two great commandments, for the opportunities that have been given to us, that will determine our rewards in heaven. That's so much, so strongly within my own heart. Our final rewards in heaven will be based on how we have fulfilled these great commandments. I can imagine, like, just say Jesus comes up to me in heaven and he says, Geoff, and I think he knows my name. I mean, well, he's God, so I guess he'll know my name. And he says, Geoff, what rewards are you expecting before my judgment seat? And what if I, coy and say, well, I was a pastor. And he's kind of looking at me like, whoa, that didn't go down well. Well, Jesus, the Church Vision Christian family. You're not smiling yet. Jesus, you know how long I was a pastor there for, and you understand all the things that may, in some people's mind, carry great value before the judgment seat of Christ, when there are rewards given to believers, may not carry the same way. You understand that? And I just picked on myself because I didn't want to pick on anyone else. So, back in John 13, verse 2, the evening meal was being served. So they are bringing out the food, right? They are bringing out the food. And then, so all that is happening, and despite, got different stuff happening here except what I want. Oh, I just lost it all. What have you got there? All right, I've got everything. Oh, we're back on track. Thank you. There we go. Now, despite Leonardo da Vinci's famous painting about them sitting at a table, which would have been true in Da Vinci's time, but certainly wasn't true in the New Testament biblical era. They would have been laying on the floor on their sides, so they could just use the arm they were not leaning on to just reach out to the table. They would have been around the table, so you see their feet would have been on the outside. Some of you may remember from the Gibson movie, The Passion, where Jesus creates a chair. Do you remember that in the movie? It kind of passes over. And Mary, his mother, looks at it and kind of says, that'll never catch on. Because it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ahead of its time. It's just a little bit of humour that Gibson had thrown in. So the second part of verse 2, it says this, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray him. So let me just put to you the demonstration of the pure love of God that Jesus is going to show to his disciples cannot be understood by the world. It's something that is foreign to the world. And so sometimes, I remember the night that I was baptized in the Holy Spirit and coming home to a little flat, and I had a flatmate who had some friends over, and trying to explain to him the extraordinary thing that had just happened to me. And you know how sometimes when a dog looks at you, and it's your dog, so it's not barking and snarling and biting you, and it puts its head on the side like, what? I don't know what, I don't speak your language. And I'm trying to explain this amazing experience where the Spirit of God came on me and I breathed the Spirit and filled to overflowing. And they're just looking at me like, you are one weird dude. Because they could not understand. They all claimed to be Christians. Not in church life. I think there were 3 of them there. None in church life. But they could not understand. It was just foreign to them. And what Jesus is going to be explaining to his disciples, it is foreign to the world. It is foreign to the world. All right, so verse 3 says this. Verse 3 said, Jesus knew in 2 things. One, the Father had put all things under his power. And the second thing, that he had come from God and was returning to God. So Jesus could do what he was about to do because of the things that he knew. Jesus was very whole emotionally. Psychologically, he was the perfect human being. Not only was he without sin, but emotionally he was a whole person. And I have learned and I have seen, the more whole we are emotionally, the easier servanthood becomes to us. But the less whole we are emotionally, I've seen the harder servanthood is. And I've seen that over decades and decades and decades. I've seen people who started well, but they've had perhaps a trauma in their background and great difficulties, and I've seen how hard it's been for them to grasp hold of servanthood and to consistently live out servanthood in their own hearts and lives. So to me, there's a great need to ask the Lord Jesus to help us be whole people. Because the more whole we are, the more we can fulfill the servanthood role that Jesus is calling us to. Verse 4. Verse 4 says, so he got up from the meal. And I want you to just picture this situation. In their culture, in the culture of their day, a wife might wash her husband's feet. Children might wash their father's feet. Disciples might wash their master's feet. But in every case, it would be an act of extreme devotion. They would not do it normally or ordinarily. It was completely outside of their comfort zone. Foot washing was always done by a servant, and it was not done by those participating in a meal, and certainly not by the host for a meal. We know that even a Jewish slave would never be asked to wash another Jew's feet. If a Jew had servants, if a Jew in his own home, if he had servants, he would always get his Gentile, his non-Jewish servant, to wash the feet of guests, because for a Jew, you would not wash people's feet. It was just outside of the way that they thought. So if you can imagine this situation, they come in to a meal. They are all sitting with their feet behind them, but it's in a circle. The host is the Lord Jesus. So normally it's up to the host to arrange who would wash people's feet. Well, I don't think we have any equivalent today. We don't have any kind of social equivalent. But when someone came around for a meal, their feet were always washed. That was simply, it was just always socially done. I remember as kids, we were always told to wash your hands before eating. Remember those days? Now kids get into the most, they go down some filthy creek that's covered in who knows what, and then they come and they shove sandwiches and stuff into their face, or these days not sandwiches, it's chicken nuggets and party pies and who knows whatever. But we don't have any equivalent like it. But they always wash people's feet before a meal. It was just always done. Lots of preachers like to say, well, there were animals on the road, and there'd be animal dung on the road and all that sort of thing. But I tell you what, a good Jew, and particularly the part of Jerusalem they're in, there'd be no animal dung. It would just be the dirt and the dust. And so they're kind of sitting around, they're kind of thinking, they're feeling uncomfortable, Because they know no one's washed their feet. They know that it's up to the host, who is the Lord Jesus, and he's probably looking around smiling. He knows what's coming. He knows. I can imagine what some of the disciples must have been thinking. I'm not going to wash anyone's feet. My goodness, because thinking for a Jew, you do not wash people's feet. You might wash your master's feet, but it's only a mite. It's only a mite. And so they're going through this, and we've already had Peter and John saying, we want to be the ones who be right up top. We want to be the ones who have the place of ascendancy when you come in your kingdom. John's even got his mother in on the act. My goodness, who could refuse a mother? The Catholic Church has based a lot of doctrine on that. But if you could understand that they'd be thinking, man, I'm not going to do it. I'm still angry with I said Peter before, James and John. I'm still angry with them, still wanting to be the one who will be lifted up. And so they're all going through this kind of thing. They're all thinking, man, we feel uncomfortable with this. It's kind of like something should have happened. And then Jesus does the most unbelievable thing. He gets up and he begins to move around. Read verse 4 and verse 5. It said, so he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, not shown in this picture, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. I can just imagine the disciples thinking, this isn't happening. This isn't how it's meant to be. And probably thinking, look, the thought entered my head, I should have helped whoever was going to do it. I mean, it would have done James and John the world of good to get up and wash our feet. Smarty Pants wanted to be the top dog. And Peter, man, he enters every room mouth first. Man, he's just, and they would have had, the stuff going on in their own hearts. And they're all thinking, man, I would want to wash their feet. But then Jesus stands up. Jesus takes off the outer clothing. Jesus takes the place of a servant. Humility had no value in either Greek society or Roman society. Even though there have been great Greek thinkers and great Roman thinkers, they had gone through things that they said were great virtues. None of them ever named humility as a virtue. None of it. Wasn't part of Greek society, wasn't part of Roman society to name humility as a great virtue. Now someone may say, but surely within Israel to be a Jew would be to be a humble person would be a great thing. Humility had value. But to the Jews, humility never overruled your position in society. You understand that if you had a position in society, they saw you could be a humble person, but you never compromise your position. You never do anything that would be acting out humility, that would seem to be stepping out of the position you had in society. I came across this story of the Jewish rabbi, Judah HaNasi, 220 years after Jesus was first here on earth, and he was the leading rabbi who put together the Mishnah, which is Israel's oral laws, all the oral traditions that have been passed down, and they began to codify them, began to write them out. And this man was the man who led the priesthood class. Who were writing them down, remembering them, gathering them. And they called this man the humblest Jew in the entire nation amongst all of God's people. But it was said of this man that he always insisted on being addressed by his exalted name and position. He would never lay that down. They said that he was humble in every other way. He would help all kinds of people. But he demanded that he be addressed by his exalted name. And there was something within the Jewish framework, within the Jewish thinking, that would not compromise their standing and their position. So if you can get that background, you understand how extreme what Jesus did really was. How extreme it was. It was just completely outside of anything that they would think would happen. we have situations, we have situations, I jumped ahead of myself here a bit with this one, where we think we are doing something and we think, I'm doing this because it's a humble thing to do. Can you read it from the back, or was it printed a bit small? And yet still, there are things in us. It's kind of like the Jewish rabbi that we will help people who are on some social or economic or some other status who are not on the same level, if we want to use that kind of terminology. But there's something in our heart we will not let go of. We still want to be. We still want to hold on to something. We still want to just keep something in there. A certain humility. I can't seem to get this one moving. Can I do it here? Oh, there we go. So, and I know in a ministry realm deep down, so many people who would say, I'm living for a cause. But there's something in them that is living for applause. Teresa put this slide up. She did the whole thing. It's going to become a Facebook sensation. But she can't take any applause for it. There is something within the heart that God goes after. You know, sometimes, and I've been with people that and I've sometimes heard stories where they told me of something God was going after in their heart. And I looked at it and I thought, are you sure God's going after that in your heart? Like, to me it's such a minor thing, it's such a small thing. And you're treating it like it's the worst sin in the whole world. I remember hearing David Ravenhill, who, from memory, one of David's brothers married a lady who was Argentinian. She'd been through a great outpouring of God's Spirit. And her heart, there was a softness, there was a suppleness in her heart that generally within Christians or Western background you don't find. But David said that if she ever was even just a little bit irritated and just said something to her husband, which was just a little bit irritated. And ladies, have you ever said anything where you're a little bit irritated to someone? But if she would say something that she knew she was a bit irritated, David said, and it's his brother's wife, his sister-in-law, she'd go into the room and she wouldn't come out for like 2 hours. And he could hear her in there crying and weeping and crying out to God for her heart to be changed. Anyone in here ever done that? Most? Oh, better not say that. Sometimes when we get a bit irritated, we don't think we have to change anything. We think who has to change? The one who irritated us. The other one. But sometimes God goes after stuff. God goes after stuff deep within. And you know, when you're, and I've been with people that have told me something God's dealing with in them, and I'm thinking, my goodness, I do that all the time. I've never thought twice about it. And then, you know, God is dealing with me over this thing. Can I just say, be sensitive to that. People may be going through things that God hasn't dealt with you over. But it can still be such a very, very deep dealing. I would love to say, within myself, I am 100% living for the cause and not living for applause. But you know, the Spirit of God would stand back and go, And then if I persisted, He would probably arrange a circumstance that exposed my heart, and then I think, oh, I didn't know that was there. And God said, precisely. I've seen it there all along. And I'm going after it in you. So he in a ministry realm, and we know the very word ministry is the normal word for serving. I love a story that I had read now. I think I read it in an R.T. Kendall book, but a story of a man who was speaking at a conference where Brother Andrew was the main speaker, and he was a secondary speaker, and he was so excited because he'd never met Brother Andrew. He didn't even know what he looked like. And when he flew in and he was picked up at the airport, and then the man who picked him up took him to the hotel where he was staying and got him settled in, and then took him down after that when he was settled in to the conference venue just before it started, took him to his seat, and he's looking around because he's one of the speakers, and he's so excited because he wants to meet Brother Andrew. He's so excited. He's sharing the platform with Brother Andrew, for crying out loud. And then when they introduce Brother Andrew, and Brother Andrew stands up and goes to the microphone. Who is Brother Andrew? The one who picked him up from the airport, the one who took him to his hotel, the one who picked him up from his hotel, the one who took him to the conference venue, the one who made sure he had his cup of tea or cup of coffee or whatever he had to have, the one he was settled. And you know, it ended this guy's heart. He never even asked the name of the person who was doing all this. That's servanthood. That's servanthood. That's taking off the outward garment. That's putting on the garment of a servant, the garment of a slave. That's going around. That's washing people's feet. Jesus knew it was so important that the disciples learn this lesson. That even though he was about to be arrested, just later that night, and then the next day crucified, he waited until the moment. This moment, this final moment, he had to keep it in their minds. If you've lost a loved one, you will so often remember and treasure the last time you saw them. And then Jesus, knowing this, knowing what's going to be happening that very night, knowing his disciples will flee and leave him, as the soldiers come in, and he does this thing. He wants it written indelibly into their minds so they never forget. What does love look like? What does love look like? This is what love looks like. You know, we think, oh, serving people and being seen and being patted on the back and told how good it was and everything else. This is what love looks like. This is what love looks like. It's taking it out. It's serving others. It's laying down our lives. And let me come back, and I'm almost through. The two things that Alan Sparks said. Number one, he said laying our lives down for others is a central part of what it means to be a human being. Then the second thing, he said laying our lives down for others